I was born into a very traumatic history. I was conceived in a time where my parents were no longer living together due to apartheid. And even as my mom tells me, my conception, she didn't even actually know she was pregnant. The doctor had diagnosed me as a fibroid. So even coming into this world, instead of my mom breaking water, she actually broke huge black blood clots. So I always say that from my conception to my birth, it was already traumatic. I cannot tell my story without intrinsically involving my mother. But before I even get to my mother, the woman who raised me, I'd like to introduce my backstory. I'm Lindiwe Hani, and I'm the youngest daughter of Chris Hani. Chris Hani is very well known, or was very well known in South Africa. He has a big legacy. He was an incredible leader, and he was a phenomenal father. He was part of MK, and he was part of the ANC. We were 3 girls living in Lesotho, in Maseru. By the time I came around, apparently I was even a child that was consumed with silence. My mother would say that she never would have to check on me. She never heard me cry, to the point where she had to move my cot from the bedroom to the kitchen so that she can remind herself that there's a baby in the house. I believe that this was my way of always staying in the background, of not causing trouble to this already traumatized family. Dimpo, that's my mother's name. She was, and she still is, old age has softened her corners a bit, but she was an incredibly formidable woman. You'd have to be married to a terrorist. She managed to raise 3 girls beautifully, very Martha Stewart-like in the home, but she had a tongue that could cut like nothing could. She has actually been known to reduce grown men, comrades, to tears. And this was the woman who raised me. She was very hard on us. But at the same time, her love came into the care she put. I didn't grow up hearing Mama say, "I love you," or just Mama giving us a hug. But I grew up in a warm home. I grew up with baking, cooking, every single comfort creature, every single comfort that I could have. We had a beautiful home. But in terms of my mother saying those words, "I love you," or just giving us a hug, that never happened. Lesotho was a very, very beautiful place to grow up. The only danger that we had was being Chris Hani's family. We managed as a family to escape the 1982 raids, where over 80 Basotho were killed, and because they actually came into the country specifically looking for Chris Hani. My mom, every morning before going to school, she would go to the car. She'd open the bonnet. She would pretend to look while we are standing 10 meters away. When we asked her, "Why, Mama? Why are you doing this?" She says, "No, Ndatwa Lona said I must pretend to open the bonnet to check because they are watching, so that they'll be more unlikely to put a car bomb." So this was my mother's reality. Only when I got older, I realized how frazzling, how traumatic this was. So we managed to only see my father once a year for 3 months during a holiday. And that was my holiday dad. I mean, my dad was fantastic because we got my mother, who was the disciplinarian. She was the everyday ruler of the household. And I mean, I don't want to compare her to African dictators, but it was a close race. It was a very, very close race. And then we had Daddy, because he rarely saw us. Oh no, he was the fun-loving dad. We were swimming, we were cycling, we were running, we were doing this. He was picking me up. And I was the baby, so I got all of that kind of attention, and I yearned it, and I demanded it. There, our lives became hopeful, because then it was announced that now the political parties are being unbanned. People can come home. I remember walking back from school in Maseru, and we lived in a block of flats. I walked up into the home, and it was the first time I'd ever seen that scene. My mom actually was losing her mind. She was running up and down the passage of the flat, just screaming. And if she wasn't screaming, ANC has been unbanned, or that Nelson Mandela is going to be released. She was screaming and crying tears of joy, and she kept on saying, "Your father's coming home, your father's coming home." Now, I started crying because I had never had a physical father. I had only had him from a distance, and emotionally, he was always available. But I had never had a physical father in my life. So there comes Daddy for the first time to visit us. Now ANC has been unbanned. We're hearing he's coming at 12. Daddy's coming at 12, and he's coming during the week. So when we hear that he's coming at 12, I stand by the flat gates waiting for his car. And I'm pacing. Now, all my friends now in the neighborhood, in the flats, know this is happening. Because I mom go posy of the flats, I don't have a father. Now look, I have a father, he's coming, Daddy's coming. So now the car pulls up, and I see it from a distance. And as it winds and coming to the gate, I start screaming, Daddy, 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 Daddy. He opens the door, and then he just waves and he steps out. And of course, there are tears, my sisters come. And he was just spending a few days with us before then he had to go to other secret places. I'd be lying to if I had to tell you where that man spent a lot of his time. But for those few days, it was the first time in my life that he was at home with us as a family. The first time my father took me to school. The first time I saw my parents' marriage in light of our real world as opposed to them being on holiday. It was the first of so many. The first time my dad saw me running at cross country at school, I wanted to impress him so badly. It was cross country, so you imagine the distance. I sprinted that, ended up having an asthma attack because I wanted to come first so that my dad could be proud. We moved to South Africa, I think it was end of 90. And then I saw my mom grow into her role. You know, she was always the only one who made rules. Then I saw her almost transform into being a wife. Suddenly, if I said, Mama, there's a party, can I go to it? Buzan tatao, ask your father. Ask your father. Now, that was a first. But I had to acclimatize. My mom became, her face even changed. There was so much peace in her face. You know, she became the hostess. When the ANC cadres would come over, she became my father's right-hand person. It was just different. We thought that the promises that had been made by the liberation were coming true. You know, we were together as a family. We went 1993 in April. My mom and I decided for Easter we're going to go travel to Lesotho to visit family and friends because we missed home. We leave. My dad stays behind with my middle sister, Kwezi. Saturday morning, there's a lot of confusion. People are in Maseru are looking for my mom. I'm at my best friend's house. I'm like, I don't know where my mom is. We're about to go watch a movie. So we go. My friend and I'm like, I don't know where my mom is, fine. Then as we're walking to go to the movie house in Maseru, we decide to go stop by another friend's house. And that was the same friend whose parents were looking for my mom earlier. And as we approached the gate, we saw my mom's car. And my friend was like, oh, look, your mom is even here. Maybe she can give us a lift. And we're like, okay. And as I walked towards the gate, I just saw people come out of the house. I saw my cousin Bali come out of the house, and they were crying. I saw my family friends. Everyone was crying. And in that chaos, I was looking around, trying to find my mother. And finally, I locked eyes with my mom. And then before I even said anything, she says, we have to go back to Joburg. I said, why, Ma? She goes, your father has been shot. So I said, okay, it's not the first time. So I'm quite calm about it. I'm like, okay, Mama, then which hospital is he in? And then she looked at me dead in the eye, and she goes, no, baby, this time he's been shot dead. So now we gathered all our things, and that chaotic, I don't remember it. I don't remember going to my friend's house, getting my luggage. I remember nothing. It was a blur. What I do remember was the 4-hour trip back to Joburg. In that car, in the back seat, because my uncle was driving. And the whole time thinking, this is not true. It cannot be possible. We've just found ourselves as a family. Daddy has had so many attempts in his life and he's managed to escape. This man cannot be slain. Not Daddy. It cannot happen. And I just said, as soon as I get home, all I need to do is see Kwezi. Because she was there, and if I see Kwezi, I will know that it's not true. Daddy's not dead. It's just a rumor. We drive into Dawn Park, and we lived in a cul-de-sac. As we approach our street, there are throngs of people on the side, and they are singing freedom songs. And I'm like, okay, maybe they've also just heard the rumor. But as we approach the driveway and we drive up, and the car stops, and I open my door, I look down, and there's still a pool of congealed blood. And then that's when my sister came from the house running, and she was crying. So we ran to each other, we hugged, we held on, and then I just looked at her and I said, Kwezi, she goes, Daddy's dead, Daddy's dead. And then we just spent the whole night embracing ourselves. To say that was the most unexpected, the most painful, would be an understatement. I was 12 years old. I was suddenly thrust into an unprecedented time of my life. There were people all the time. You know how black people, how we like to mourn. And I just could not get space. So the whole week is chaotic, everything is happening. And the entire time, I've just lost my father. The whole entire week, I am being told, stay strong. Don't cry. Don't show South Africa you're crying. They are watching you. As a 12-year-old, I learned from that day, oh, this is how I deal with pain. I must keep it in. I must not show it because I must learn to be strong. Now, we don't even as kids have access to our mother during this painful time. Mama is in the bedroom. She's on the mattress. She's the widow. People are seeing her, up and down. I don't remember having one interaction with my mom where I was held, where I was told it's going to be okay. Because now she had that role to play. And I understand now as a person who's older that she was in the middle of it. She had her own confusion. But as a child, one tends to feel neglected. And you learn how to think, okay, how am I going to get through this without her? The funeral happened. I don't remember who spoke, what they said. I just remember that I was at the graveyard and a dove was thrust into my hands and guns went off and I was told to let go of this dove. And from this day, even now, I still have that innate fear of birds. When a death happens in your immediate family and the chaos of the week happens, you don't have time to think about what's happening. What happens afterwards, that's where the pain comes. The silence of abandonment. Because now everybody has to return to their normal lives. And we were left in a hole that felt like a ghost town. Every corner where I turned, I thought my father would be there. My mother was a zombie. She'd wake up every morning at 3 a.m. to clean because that's how she was dealing with it. And we were just told to go back to school. And I don't remember being offered therapy. I just knew that I had to pretend that everything was okay. I had to pretend everything was fine. Our world didn't just implode. I went to boarding school after that because I had to get away from Johannesburg. And that's where I kind of found my voice a bit, just a tiny bit. But at this stage now, I'm no longer Lindy. I'm no longer Lindy. That person has gone. Now I'm Lindiwe Hani, Chris Hani's daughter. And that's how from the time my father died, I was always introduced. So I stopped trying to figure out who I was. Because now I'm Chris Hani's daughter, that's who I'll ever be. And being that person brought so much immense pressure in my life. Because he was blooming Chris Hani. There's no way I could measure up to that. So I decided to pretend to not care about it and to just do things my way. My way turned out to be the most destructive, painful way. I started drinking heavily at the start of varsity. Before it would start out as the weekly parties, you start from Wednesday, you stop on Sunday, etc., etc. And then during that partying season, in 2001, 10th of March, a month just before my dad's commemoration of his death, we get word that my sister Kwezi had died. The way she had died was still not sure. She died away from home, and the way we found out was the most traumatic. Early Saturday morning, my mother phones me, I'm in Cape Town. She says, Lindiwe, City Press has just called me. Baro Kwezi is dead. Is this true? So I'm thinking, what? So I now phone around, and I finally get in touch with one of Kwezi's friends, and then she confirms that it's true. So I had to phone my mother to confirm that the newspaper was right. Her daughter is dead. So once again, the cycle began. I got home, the house was full, we didn't talk about it. We were skirting around the issue. I had to be strong. This was the year I turned 21. My sister was my best friend. You know, the two of us, I think, got through everything because we knew we had each other. So the pain of losing my father was incredible, but the pain of losing Kwezi was just unfathomable. That's the year that I tried my first line of cocaine, and I never turned back. For the next 13 years, I became a drug and an alcoholic, and my choice of drug was coke. In those years, I drew further and further apart from my mother, and I just decided that I can do this on my own. I was very destructive. But in between all of that, I managed to fall pregnant, and I managed to have the most incredible daughter amongst this madness. I believed that if I had to have my daughter, who I named Kaya, my life would be great. My life would be happy. I would find myself. I'd get Kwezi back, you know? The pain and the trauma that went through would dissipate because now I have her. It happened. I lasted, a year? I was on the straight and narrow. But she wasn't enough. I went back to my lifestyle, and I would use, and I would drink, and I would use and drink, until in 2013, I had been on a binge for a few days. I come back to my house, and I just had a realization that the way that I'm going, two things are going to happen. I am going to continue down this road, and I'm going to die, or I'm going to get help. I had no problem with death. I did not mind the dying part. In fact, I welcomed it. I was in so much pain that death was going to be a relief. Then I stopped, and I thought about Kaya. And I realized that if I die from a drug overdose, because that was what the likelihood, Kaya was going to always think that she was never good enough for me to stop using. And as clear as day, I felt my daughter's pain and trauma, and I saw her pick up her first drug. And I said to myself, not today. The cycle of pain and trauma in the Hani family stops with me. My daughter is not going to inherit it. So I checked myself into rehab that very week, and I haven't looked back. It was not the easiest of journeys, but it was the most fulfilling of journeys, because when I stepped into those rooms, I was Lindiwe Hani, drug addict. For the first time, I had to own my journey and who I was, and I was no one's child, because no one cares in the rooms. The only thread we have of commonality is the pain and hurt and trauma that brought us to our knees, that made us seek that help. I was liberated. I didn't have to pretend to be someone else. I didn't have to live up to expectations, whether my own or whether other people's that I perceived. I felt free. I spent 2 months in an institution, and I walked out believing that, I had this image that I was going to step out of rehab, and there was going to be a parade, okay? There were going to be the balloons, the music that would be playing would be, oh, hallelujah. Life was the same. I had to now learn how to adapt. There's a term, now you have to accept life on life terms. And that was a long journey. The very first year, I got retrenched. I had to learn how to deal with that without turning to a bottle or a line. And it was difficult. I spent 3 years in therapy, going to groups to cope. But the one thing that I had was that I knew that I deserved better. I knew that happiness had to be part of my life somehow. And I decided that I'm going to continue on this journey. I am not going to stop because there is something waiting for me. And in that, immediately after celebrating a year of sobriety, I was approached, do I want to write a book? And that was a new part of my journey. And I decided that I'm going to write this book and I'm going to be completely honest. The book being Chris Hani's daughter, how I've always felt I lived in the shadow of a man, and how I came to my journey of finding peace. And I took on that journey in real time. I decided to confront my father's assassins. I met them in prison. That also closed another chapter for me. I woke up feeling more free. And the biggest thing is that in this whole thing, I learned how to set boundaries with the most important person in my life, my mother. My mom and I had a conversation after I came out of rehab, and I said, Mama, you and I need a break because you are my biggest trigger. And we took that break, and she gave me that break. But I said to her, as much as you and I cannot have a relationship, that's your granddaughter, I'll never take that away, you're a fantastic grandmother. And I saw the pain in my mother's eyes as I effectively rejected her because I had to work on myself. Because my mom comes from the school, the black African woman's school of strength means resilience. It means that you don't cry. You take things, you bury them deep, deep down, and you take them to your deathbed. And that kind of life was not serving me well. I came out of my entire journey of the trauma, of the pain, of the recovery. And I came to realize, because I abhor, I used to hate that term strength. And people used to like to put it on me, Lindiwe, you're such a strong woman. And because of my past, I compared it to just negativity. I don't want to be strong. I don't want to have this persona of strength because for me it felt like if I'm told I'm being strong, I cannot be vulnerable. I cannot feel pain. So I rejected it for a very long time. But now I have come to claim that word strength as the power of being vulnerable, of the power of allowing myself to feel pain. Because strength is not crying. Strength and the beauty of strength is actually crumbling, is actually letting something beat you. And then the beauty keeps going, and the most amazing thing that happens is that it's how you get up. Because we all falter, we all fail, we all cry, we all have death in our lives. And listen, it can paralyze you. It paralyzed me for many, many, many years. But I have taken my pain, I have decided to own it, and I have realized that at the end of this entire life that I've lived, the woman that I'm going to be is the one who allowed herself to be honest. I allowed myself to tell my truth. I didn't allow the people to dictate who I am. And there is strength in that. The strength in my journey is that I had the power of being vulnerable in front of many, many, many people. And they witnessed my demise, but they've also managed to witness my rising and my overcoming this incredible trauma that happened. And I am very, very proud of that. And as I look at my daughter who's 16 now, and I see her strength, and her strength is being able to be who she is. And she no longer owns my pain. She's going to have her own. I mean, black woman, you're going to have your own pain. But as long as she doesn't inherit mine. And that is the kind of legacy that I want to leave in this world. That black woman, there is nothing wrong with breaking down. The entire power is how we all get back up. So let's all rise together. Because if I can do it, I know that we all can.